and the Legacy Open Series and all that kind of stuff, they can allow people to play with some of their toys, even though they're not the most pleasant thing for gameplay at all times.
So what about having it being played at the PTQ level makes it be banned more aggressively?
They had to be more concerned about tournament logistics and just the overall kind of experience that more new players are having.
All right, so Peters on the play is going to start out with Deathrite Shaman. It's always a good weapon in this matchup. How much removal can Lossett have? If he has enough for one-for-ones, he can just grind Peters out of this. Remember, with Peters on a mull to 5 and Lossett on the draw, he's already +3 cards.
Yeah.
But one thing he does have on his going for his side is that Kyle Peters has tempo, being a Delver player. So with that turn 1 Deathrite, he's going to get to deploy his threats much more quickly than Lossett can. If he can get ahead on the board, maybe he can sneak a win here.
And Joe is a little land light with his hand. And quite frankly, the counterbalance deck does get some pretty unwieldy draws when it doesn't have Divining Top and Brainstorm. You can draw things out of order or too many expensive spells or what have you. So there's no guarantee that Joe wins on a 5-card hand.
Yep. Tarmogoyf is the second play. He's currently just a Squire. He's 1-2. Kyle does have that land in the yard, which he did not use. We'll see those other 2 cards are Wasteland and Force of Will.
And you see Joe, the only other land in his hand is a Volcanic Island. So this Wasteland does give him the hope of stealing this game, I think.
Yep, plays a Volcanic Island. He does have Sensei's Divining Top into play. Kyle, wishing he had another blue card, I think he would force it if he could. But that Divining Top is going to, eventually it's going to draw Joe out of this land screw.
Well, this is about as good as it's going to get, I think, for Kyle here. He has a Wasteland, which is on. He's just drawn a Tarmogoyf. It's going to have a reasonable amount of pressure in play.
Yeah.
And Joe may not be able to find a land for a while.
Yep, there's some danger. There is some inherent danger in here. So he can, like his Goyfs aren't that big, and Joe does have a Divining Top, so Kyle's going to be all but dead to a Terminus if Joe can find one.
Yeah, he cannot beat most of the powerful cards out of Joe's deck at this point, but he can hope that Joe just doesn't find lands or doesn't find Terminus.
He's going to go ahead and cast Tarmogoyf. In response, Joe cracks his fetch land for a Tundra. This will give Kyle options on which land he wants to waste.
Since the Volcanic is only in here really for Red Blast and some sideboard cards, and the Tundra turns on all sorts of stuff, I think Kyle's going to take out that Tundra if he's familiar with Joe's list.
Joe's going to go ahead and spin top. He sees Swords, Island, and a third one. It's not a Terminus, though.
Well, the thing here, I mean, Joe does find...
Counterspell is the third.
Joe does find a land.
Kyle opts not to waste Joe that turn.
Wow, that is...
I have to think that's a mistake. You're playing a tempo game here. I think you want to cut him off his mana sources.
And white mana also. I mean, that's another part of this, too.
Yeah, Joe's going to get a pretty functional game now. Draws the 3 there. Does now have the Swords and Counterspell in his hand. He's going to be able to get one of these threats off the board.
Although, oddly, this could end up working out kind of well for Kyle, because if Joe sets Terminus on top and then gets Wastelanded off of white mana, I mean, that's actually kind of funny.
Now, did he have a Terminus here?
He put Entreat as the second card back. I don't know what he put as the first card.
All right, so Kyle's on tap here. He gets one more shot. We'll see what he does. Draws a Polluted Delta. No help there. Maybe he's slightly closer to casting that Force of Will, but that's still a ways off. Yeah, I have to think you're wasting him off white mana.
I mean, if Joe did end up setting Terminus, I don't think he has any more lands, so this could actually work out, oddly enough, very well for Kyle.
Kyle's going to swing the 2 Goyfs, not swinging the Deathrite Shaman. It's a tricky game here because you want to hit the Brainstorm for more damage, but at the same time, you don't want to shrink your Tarmogoyfs. Kyle is going to play Wasteland, waste the Tundra correctly here. I think Joe will. He's going to opt to Swords. We will see. He's going to go ahead and activate Divining Top. And that is the Terminus.
Yep.
And in here was the danger of not wasting that previous turn. And Kyle Peters is going to get to eat that card in Joe's graveyard, but he's going to lose everything for it.
And Joe would have been completely cut off if that Tundra was wasted the previous turn. I mean, he would have... You know, he's not finding any more lands. I believe he's Brainstorm Lock as things currently stand. And Kyle would have been able to deal a lot of damage. His, Swords of Plowshares would have been turned off, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, stuck on 2 lands. He does have a Counterbalance and a Divining Top. Can't play them both. He's really stuck on land, but we'll see which way he goes. He's going to go ahead and just cast the Divining Top, hoping for more land. And he passes back. But remember, no threat. It's just forcible and polluted Delta in Kyle Peters' hand. All right, he does have one more threat. It's going to be a Delver of Secrets.
Well, this one's going to have to go all the way, I think.
It's true. All the way's not that far. It's Joe's at 10. So it's 4 turns. Maybe 3 if Joe helps him with a fetch land or something of the sort. I have to imagine Joe's pretty good at managing his life total from these spots. I don't think he's going to mess it up. We see Entreat, I think Terminus, and some white spell and something else on top.
Still no lands, though. That's the big thing.
Yep, no land. Okay, not Terminus. It's Venser, Shaper, Savant was his draw here. So Joe can't really cast too much. He's going to set up countertop. And it's good. He has the combo. Now he just has to deal one. If he can deal with this Delver, he should be home free. Force of Will flip Delver into Insectile Aberration. Any instant there would have been pretty good. Actually, Force, you know, it's a blue card. It flips Delver. That's about as good as he could hope.
And even better still, it's a 5-coster. I mean, it's going to be outside of a counterbalance range most likely.
Yeah, I mean, it's a blue card for his Force already. It's pretty good. Here's Joe. Can he find a land? Digs one deeper. And he finds a land, but it is basic island. Now, if he gets to a 4th land, it doesn't matter what color it is because he can Venser and bounce things. And he may have a Vendilion Click in here as well.
Yeah, you get the vibe here that Joe might just barely get squeezed out of this game.
It's going to be close. You know, I think he's going to try for this Vendilion Click to block. And I imagine that will draw the Force of Will from Kyle. He can't let this Insectile Aberration die. Let's draw for the turn. It looks like it may have been Deathrite Shaman. He's going to cast that pre-combat. See, he's going to try to get, I mean, it's going to get countered. Question is how.
Yeah, the Deathrite's not really getting much better. The only other option that Kyle has here is to wait until he draws Abrupt Decay and try to break out. But he might feel like Joe is squeezed enough on mana right now, and having to recast the Divining Top is enough of a cost that it's worth throwing this into the maw of top plus counterbalance.
So we still have that Entreat and Terminus floated on top. What's the 3rd one deep? I don't believe it is a land. We may see it. Deathrite. Yeah, he does not find a 1, so he's going to have to crack the top. And that does put a squeeze on Joe's mana. He's going to reveal top and counter the Deathrite.
And if he redeploys top, you know, then that's another turn that he's not casting something like Vendilion Click that could potentially block the Insectile Aberration.
Yeah, that card 1 deeper was Jace the Mind Sculptor, so that still is no help. Joe reassembles countertop, and he has a counter spell proper in his hand. But his hand right now, I mean, if you look at it, what is it? Misdirection, Counterspell, Swords to Plowshares, Venser, Jace, Vendilion Click. No white mana in play. He does not have answers at the moment. He's going to dig on his own turn to try to find that elusive white mana, and it's a Force of Will. Force of Will may be good enough. No, because he's going to go to 1 on this attack, and he can't fight a Force versus Force war. Yeah. If he draws the Force, he can't fight a Force versus Force war.
Yeah, if he keeps Force of Will floated on top, then it's excellent for him.
Right, if he chooses to draw it, he's going to lose. So he decides to rearrange his top. Is he going to draw Force of Will for the turn? He can't cast it. He's at 1. And I think, what did he do? Yeah, he drew the Force. So a little bit of a misstep here from Lossett.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, if he has no backup plan here, if he's all in on this Vendilion Click resolving to block or something.
Yeah, if he'd drawn anything else and left the Force on top, then this Vendilion Click would come into play and would be able to block and win.
And once he blocks and trades, he's probably in the clear.
Right. Well, maybe not, because when he has to tap out to block and trade and then keep that Force on 5 to counter Force, he's tapped all his mana and he's set his top card to 5. So like that turn, Kyle probably gets a chance to resolve one other thing.
Sure.
Because like the counterbalance is kind of offline.
Yeah, and then it's on Joe to find a 4th land or some, you know, or a white source of mana, whatever the case may be. But it looks pretty favorable from that spot.
Yeah, I do think drawing Force of Will doesn't make sense to me because he's at 1. I mean, I think he's drawing it because he just wants to float the other 2. Is like the default plays when you're a Miracles player, you know, you don't draw that Terminus and Entreat. Like, but I think it's going to come back to get him. Gonna say go. discarding, ask if any responses. Nope, he's going to discard Spell Pierce. And Kyle going to swing for the fence. Joe goes for Vendilion Click. That's going to get a Force of Will. I have to think it's going to get a Force of Will.
Yeah, it's not getting better.
Yep, force pitching Delver. And that puts Kyle to 18. And Joe can't force back here. He's
he can misdirect.
Back. Oh wow, okay. So he is still fine here then.
Yep.
Wow, well he's not in the clear because there's still this Tarmogoyf issue that's gonna happen, right?
Well, I mean, he gets to click Kyle, and maybe he's happy to leave him with Force of Will.
Does he click Kyle or does he click himself? Clicking yourself, there's a lot of game to clicking yourself.
Sure.
This is actually a tough decision. Okay, so far be it from us to question the Miracle's master here. He's
Did
gonna
have a
click
line
Kyle.
of play.
Yeah.
I still feel there's an argument he may be better served floating the 5 regardless, but he did not leave himself simply dead to Force of Will. But now Abrupt Decay is an issue off the top.
Yep, Tarmogoyf is put on the bottom, and the 2 flyers trade. And I think the draw was Deathrite Shaman, so I think it's a 1.
And now Joe's turning the corner.
Yep. Kyle's going to pass the turn. Now Joe has Counterspell proper up, and I don't think he's going to take it down at any point. Brainstorm is in his top 3 cards. Have to think that's what he's going to draw for the turn. And Joe may have that Sly victory at 1.
He still needs to find that white mana, and keep in mind that a lot of his mana sources are fetch lands at this point too that don't work. So again, not quite out of the woods. He's susceptible to something like Abrupt Decay on the counterbalance into Deathrite Shaman, whatever, but he has gotten out of the worst of it at least.
Yep. Daze the draw for Kyle Peters. Can he get 1 more damage across? There are cards he can draw, you know, Tombstalker, for example, could be pretty good. He can daze that counterspell.
Well, Joe has found his Tundra, and now his hand really starts to get unlocked.
Yeah, now that's going to be an issue. I think Joe's going to be able to win it then at 1. And Misdirection doesn't have the pay 1 life clause that Force of Will does. So he puts 2 cards back, going to dig 1 deeper with top. He's found 1 land, no more though. I think he's going to draw a copy of Intrigued. Or no, a second copy of Divining Top. And there we go, Tundra down for Lossett.
You can see sort of this finally sort of emotional response from Joe there, getting his white source of mana.
I love it with Miracles. You say, oh, finally got that 4th land. Okay, go.
Now I'm ready to
do more.
Forget it. Never mind.
I don't even need to do anything. And shuffles through the top 3. He's going to draw a blue card there. I think it may be a Jace. It is. Second copy of the Mind Sculptor. He just needs to find more lands, but he's under no pressure. He can just leave up this counter spell and Swords to Plowshares. Along with Fencer, these things should be fine.
He still has to respect the possibility of something like Vendilion Click out of Kyle's deck too. It's not out of the question, so there is some risk to tapping out.
He's going to tap out for Jace the Mind Sculptor. Now, Kyle has Daze in his hand. I think he may just Daze this. Float a mana and Daze it seems pretty good.
Probably not getting better.
Yeah. He has Daze, Force of Will, and Deathrite Shaman, so he doesn't have a threat. He's just going to cast Daze for 2. Seems good. Joe knows the top card's not a 2, not going to fight over it. This means gives Kyle, if he draws something like Tarmogoyf, he can resolve it. It is Tarmogoyf that was his draw for the turn, wasn't it? Maybe another
suspect
Deathrite.
it was not.
Yeah, I think he would have cast it.
There is 1 Dismember in the list. Believe it may have been that.
Yeah, the biggest issue is that whenever he does choose to draw a creature, or does end up drawing a creature, Joe has the Swords to Plowshares and a Terminus floated on top, so he has just like, he has the next 2 kill spells, next 2 creatures covered.
It feels like the only way that Kyle can really break out of this is by finding Abrupt Decay pretty soon, at which point he can start playing normal Magic again.
Yeah, BT is going to need it. Joe floating more cards on top, finds another land. Remember, going to draw Tundra, still has both Entreat and Terminus floating. So he can call on those when he needs to. Does have a Terminus in hand as well. That one less relevant. We'll see if he feels like he needs to make a move. I think he may never want to take this counter spell down.
Well, he's not going to rush until Kyle makes him.
Yeah, Kyle hasn't presented any threats. Miracles is one of those decks that kind of just plays defense for the entire game.
But again, because Kyle can operate a little bit at instant speed in theory, Vendilion Click could be in his deck. And because you know that Kyle has Abrupt Decay, so there's no guarantee that your counterbalance is good for the entire game, there is an argument for Joe to try to move a little bit faster. I know it's easy to sit on this counterspell and just try to wait all day long until you can kill him at your leisure, but the Bogue deck does present some specific problems here that compel Joe to act faster than he otherwise would.
And a lot of 1-drops flooding in Kyle's hand. Ponder, Deathrite Shaman, Dismember. That's not a 1-drop, but it doesn't really do anything. And yeah, this should be it for Joe. I think he's covered his bases at this point. I don't even think Abrupt Decay is going to matter.
Yeah, he's got enough tools at this point where he can just win a normal game. You know, Venser, Counterspell, Source of Plowshares, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. He kind of went back. There was that one turn Kyle could have grabbed some aggression earlier on. He was a little gun shy on a Wasteland, and it does seem like that's, you know, I feel like there was 1 point of damage in there had he played it a little more aggressively.
Well, he did get Terminus in a spot where otherwise he would not have gotten Terminus, so
right.
I think we can safely call that at least 1 point of damage.
I wouldn't crack a fetch, but looking over Kyle's list, so what can he draw to here? Is there, you know, you're saying he has to, first of all, step 1 is Abrupt Decay the counterbalance so that Joe can stop having free counter spells and has to start spending cards. And then after that, then he has to start grinding his way through the counters and removal.
Well, here's the thing. I think Joe's hand is good enough at this point that it starts with Abrupt Decay and then becomes Hymn to Thorax, because I don't think Kyle can slog through the defensive measures that Joe has at this point.
Yeah,
he needs to attack his hand.
Terminus, counterspell, swords. You know, that's already 3, plus a Terminus on top, that's 4.
Venser,
yeah.
it's just too much.
You
just
need
too much
6.
stuff.
At that point, you need 6 threats plus an Abrupt Decay, so you need a 7-card hand to grind through this. Joe has enough mana that he can play all these things at once, too.
I think Joe may want to just turn it on here and entreat. He's been floating it for a while. Kyle's showing a lot of weakness. He could, you know, Terminus for
No need, though.
less than the full amount.
Entreat. You can entreat for 2. 2's good enough. 2's a 2 card. If you can entreat for 2, you still get to leave up counterspell while entreating it for 2. So Joe's attempting, I think, to entreat here. He taps the top. In response, Kyle's going to Brainstorm. Remember, Joe can't counter 1-drops because his top's already tapped. That's fine. Kyle gets his instance here, but I'm not sure what he does with them. He draws Hymn to Turok, Polluted Delta, Abrupt Decay. Good weapons here, but probably too little too late.
I mean, these are the cards we talked about.
Yeah.
But I agree, this is probably too much damage has already been done. Especially if Joe is ready to turn it on and just entreat and kill Kyle in a couple turns.
Yeah, looking at those top ones. Their problem is, they're all, the 1-mana spells are all sorceries, so the Brainstorm is the only one he's going to get off here. Remember, I believe we are on Kyle's end step, so we can't be casting sorceries right now.
Yeah. I'm really interested to see why Kyle seems to be contemplating this. To me, this is a pretty straightforward, you just put Dismember back and shuffle it away.
Well, if he believes in Entreat the Angels is coming, maybe he wants to keep this Dismember. He has kept the Dismember, it turns out. Puts you back. Is this card draw going to resolve now? All right, he's going to show Entreat. And he can Entreat for 2 or Entreat for 4. 4 and it's a lethal attack. 2 and he can do 2 turns and have Counterspell up. I think he's going to go for 3.
I think right now he's saying, I don't want this to get dazed, but I do want insurance against removal spells.
Fair enough. So going for 3 Angels, that's going to be 12 power in the air, 2-turn clock.
He doesn't have to worry about Spell Pierce in Kyle's hand because he has the one floating on the top of the deck. It's unlikely that there's Force of Will because he's gone through so many already, and if it does get forced, okay, cool. And this way he's protected against Dade.
And he's going to end up dismember one of the Angels, but Joe has wisely here played around the first kill spell.
I think when they're using the official tokens, we don't really care.
All right. So one of them, yep, he's going to redraw that Divining Top. It still has 8 power in the air. He's going to be able to put Kyle down to 7. He's going to force Kyle into, he's going to have to Abrupt Decay one of the Angels, which will keep him alive, but just make the game go slower.
And still, it doesn't even save him, too, because there's still an Angel left over and all that.
Yeah, just buys him a turn. But if he finds another Abrupt Decay, then we just get to keep going for a while.
Well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, I suppose.
Well, I'm not winning, but I'm not going to lose today. All right. Hammer Turok was the draw. He knew about that one from the Brainstorm. Like I said, if it was many turns ago, that would not have been a bad draw.
Am I winning? I don't know. That's kind of a loaded question. I'm not losing, you know?
Well, I'm not losing right now.
Not this moment.
And it looks like he's going to start off with Ponder, try to draw out that Divining Top. I don't think Joe cares. Joe might just
I
let
would
him
fight
ponder.
over this. Your opponent has some number of uncounterable spells in their deck.
Okay. Looks at the top 3, doesn't have a 1 in it. It's a 4, a 6, and a 0. How much does he want to fight over it?
Well, it's not even like floating a 4
and
does
a
a lot
6.
for him.
Yeah. He's going to let Ponder resolve. Polluted Delta, Wasteland, Verdant Catacombs. Well, that 3 lands aren't going to help any. So we're going to go back to the shuffle. But yeah, once again, like, I don't think there's an out he can play to.
Well, if he has running Abrupt Decays and then another Abrupt Decay, and then he can start casting spells.
But even then, he's still probably going to lose.
I think he's...
Even with 3 straight Abrupt Decays.
I suspect he is in stack my deck and still lose territory, but it's not 100%.
What if it's stack my deck and stack Joe's deck?
Oh, stacking Joe's deck, I think you can definitely win because you can just stack all the fetch lands he can't stack.
Right. So stack my deck and stack Joe's deck, we can win that game?
I think so. I think that's winnable.
Are there enough fetch lands in Joe's deck to stack it that deep, though? I don't know.
4 flush,
Eventually, you have to start giving him something.
And there's 9. That's a lot.
Joe could sword. No. Joe could swords his own angel and gain 5 and start cracking fetch lands.
Sure. Yeah, no, you're right.
No, I don't know if that works.
Still not good enough.
Maybe it'd have to be stack my deck and stack Joe's deck every time he shuffles it. You know, actual control his draws.
Yeah.
Maybe you could win there. It's going to Abrupt Decay an Angel. He goes to 3, stays alive for a turn. And Joe's going to go ahead and swords that Angel in response, give himself some breathing room.
Yeah, Kyle's so low on resources that he can afford to cash in like this.
Yep, goes to 5. Now he can crack fetch lands, which is a pretty big weapon he's reopened. Puts Kyle down to 3 and pass it back. See if Kyle can do anything else. Wasteland, that's not going to get there. He can go for this Liliana. It's not going to work, but he can go. He's got to try it.
Yeah.
I don't think he has any other weapons. He's going to him first. Maybe he can get the him. Maybe he can get the counter spell with the him.
Yeah, this is a good lead. I mean, it's good to open up with this.
If I'm Joe, I would just let it. Just because the only way you don't lose is if he has Liliana and he hits both your Venser and your counterspell off to him, then I guess he gets you. Because I have Venser and counterspell, I would actually just let him him me. Sure, it's good. He wins. He gets some value. You probably still win.
Well, Joe's trying to figure out if there's some way that he can not take the risk whatsoever. Because what you're
Sure.
describing is, yeah, Joe still wins probably over 99% of the time, but is there a way to make it 100?
The two, I mean, it's 2 and 5. Like, so there are 10 different ways he can randomly discard here. Or sorry, it's more than 10.
Well, what happens
Yes,
if he
yeah.
just Vensers the him?
Well, then then Kyle casts Liliana. Oh.
Okay, and then
oh,
you
then
have
he
your-
sacks Venser. Whoa.
then you sack your Venser.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, you have a creature, too. All right, Venser's him back to Kyle's hand. That'll do it.
All right.
Missed that part of it. I mean, to be fair, I'm pretty sure Joe can pick any line and be almost certain to win.
But that's one of those things, you know, when you get to the spot where you're, you know, over 99%, like it looks like you're there. If you suspect there's a way to make it actually 100, it's worth sitting down and trying to figure out what that route is.
Right.
Because, you know, if you make those 99% plus plays instead of the 100% plays, over the course of 100 matches, it's going to come back to haunt you that you weren't trying to seek them out. So I definitely respect Joe trying to sit there and noodle through. Is there a line that totally locks this up? And I think he correctly suspected that Liliana was Kyle's follow-up, or at least best follow-up, and found the line of play that took most of the sting out of it.
Right. All right, so we're on to, after 30 short minutes, we are on to game 2. Joe will be on the draw again. As you see, this kind of matchup, it becomes just more of a control deck, more of a removal spell postboard, getting a little more tailor-made answers. So I think postboard we start seeing things like Pyroblast or Red Blast in the deck. Rest in Peace, excellent against Bug Delver decks, as it really takes care of both Tarmogoyf and Deathrite Shaman. We could see a card like Supreme Verdict as well.
On the other side here, 2 copies of Gravdigger's Cage, a Null Rod, a Disfigure, a Life from the Loam, a Sylvan Library, a Diabolic Edict, a Pithy Needle, 2 Vendilion Clicks, 2 Thoughtseizes, and Ashiok Nightmare Weaver.
That's a card
taking a page out of Gerard
Gerard's book.
Fabiano's book right there.
I actually think that card could be decent in this
2
matchup.
Golgari Charms. So I do like the Pithy Needle, and I do like the Null Rod, just some things to fight over.
Get rid of that top.
Divining Top is public enemy number 1. You got to fight over that. I think the Sylvan Library and the 2 Vendilion Clicks and the 2 Thoughtseizes are all very well suited to play kind of a long controlling game. They're just powerful cards.
But he doesn't want to play. Does he want to play a long controlling game? I think I like the Thoughtseize because I think he's going to cut a hole here in Joe's defenses as an idea. So I still like it.
Well, I think Vendilion Click still does a lot of work against Miracles. And I think the Ashiok is, I don't know, it seems fine. You know, it's not.
Joe has to answer it, right?
It's something.
It's a threat. Joe has to answer it because when you're as defensive as Lossett's deck is, you actually have to answer everything. You can't let, you're casting your net pretty wide under the condition, though, that you can't let anything slip through it. And Ashiok is a little bit harder to kill than some of the other things.
And Joe's got some creatures. It's not impossible for things like he's got a Venser, he's got a Snapcaster, 3 Vendilion Clicks. Not out of the realm of possibility you could get something sweet off that Ashiok.
I mean, we're mainly just playing it because you can exile those cards 3 at a time, and he has to deal with it because otherwise you'll identity crisis him.
It does
That's like more or less what it does.
It messes up his divining tops to some extent. He can engineer his miracles a little bit worse. Although it does help him in some respects. It's kind of a wash, I guess, at the end of the day.
I was like, first I was like, yeah, it helps him. And then I was like, wait, actually, because it's sorcerer speed, Joe's gonna know it's coming. So maybe it actually doesn't help him.
It does a lot of things. Both players, there's a lot of play to that situation. But if Ashiok's not coming in here, then when is my question. You got one on the sideboard.
This is one of the few matchups where you certainly have time to Ashiok.
Yeah. So I hope Gerard's watching.
Actually,
more than anything else.
Legacy, I mean, it's a 3-mana Planeswalker, right? That's kind of the bar for Legacy.
Yeah. Liliana the Veil. Not that it's as powerful as Liliana the Veil, but, it's something. Gerard winning the Standard Open a little while ago, defeating Reed Duke in the finals largely on the back of Ashiok.
Yeah.
Reed Duke got ultimated, which is the first time I saw an Ashiok ultimate ever occur.
It's pretty good. It's a card identity crisis is how I think of it.
Yeah, Reed's hand was 3 game stays, so it was pretty good.
It
was pretty good to ultimate Ashiok.
Oh, okay. I mean, the control mirror, I hear Gainsay is one of the more important cards.
Oh, no, Reed was playing Mono Blue Devotion.
Oh, well, that's one of the more important cards there, too.
Yeah.
So
his creatures got killed, and then Ashiok kind of did its thing, and then we have Standard Open champion.
Yeah, so we have going to game 2 here. Remember, Lossett is playing for top 32. If you're following the regular Open, the top 8 was set going into the last round. We will bring you more info on that as we get it. It's possible, actually. So there can be some intrigue. Sometimes when the entire top 8 is set, then it starts becoming unset because some of the players at the top will start playing for seeding because they have no risk in doing so.
Correct.
I certainly am one of those really mean people that has done that before at tournaments.
While we're on the topic of free Duke, congratulations to Sugarloaf, New York's second most famous resident, Andrew Boswell, in the finals of the Grand Prix. Awesome stuff. Occasional Star City Games Open attendee.
That is a modern format Grand Prix going on this weekend. All right, game 2. Kyle's on the play. Starts with a turn 1 Delver of Secrets. This time he gets a full hand, so it's going to be a little harder. Harder for Lossett. Lossett has, once again, a pretty land-light hand, but he's got some early game action here. Swords to Plowshares and Brainstorm, both at the ready. Delver does not flip, stays a 1-1. How much aggression can he get in? Kyle has kept a hand that could really punish Lossett. It's land heavy, but it has double wasteland in it. Looks like it has double wasteland, double fetch land, and a Deathrite Shaman, I believe.
Well, Joe is always very conscious of playing around Wasteland. I don't think he's ever going to fetch for a Tundra unless he literally has no other option or doesn't care if it gets wasted.
Delver swings for 1. Deathrite Shaman joins the table. And he's going to pass. Kyle hiding the Wastelands right now rather than threatening a double Wasteland. But you're right, Joe. I mean, so he can't fetch for a basic here, but the other lands in his hand are duals. You know, you can't turn those into basics.
Yeah.
Joe's gonna play a second land and pass. This is a good, passing here is a pretty smart move. It lets him play around these wastelands if he needs to. You see Pithing Needle, the draw for Kyle. Now what he could do is he can force, like if he, say he just started on Pithing Needle this turn, he could force Joe to make a call on Brainstorm here because he, you know, see whether Joe cracks in response. I actually would have liked leading on How do you feel about leading on Pithing Needle?
I like leading on Pithing Needle. If Joe literally does nothing, you name Scalding Tar.
Right.
If he does something, you still need Divining Top.
And that was exactly my thought.
You force some sort of action.
Right. You force him to crack his fetch land before he wants to.
But yeah, force him to react first, see what he's working with, and you may induce him to fetch for a non-basic land, which is also nice for you in this scenario.
Yep. So he is going to Brainstorm. Then Tundra goes away. He does have an uncorrect fetch here. He drew a basic island off that, so his mana, while tight, is not completely under attack. And Kyle just going to swing in with that Delver. Still hasn't flipped. Joe at a very healthy 18. Now Kyle's going to throw it on Pithing Needle. Probably will get the same effect. Joe's going to have to crack this fetch land before it comes down. Yeah, you can't let that resolve.
Still gets the name Divining Top here, which is really nice for Kyle.
Yep. Now just said, he was going to grab a Tundra, but then he looked at his hand. Does he actually? Is it better than Plains? Yeah, he's going to get Tundra. Okay.
Well, he can't go get a Plains, unfortunately. So it
Oh,
has to be,
right. It has
either
to be
Island
Tundra.
or Tundra.
It is not one of the flooded strands. He could get the mountain, I suppose. Yep, so as expected, now that the Scalding Tarn is gone, the Pithing Needle is on Sensei's Divining Top. We go back to Joe. The clock winds down here. Remember, Joe fighting for those extra points, trying to add on to his lead right now.
Yep, not the ideal tournament, not the greatest weekend for Joe, but he can still salvage a lot of it here with a win.
And Polluted Delta's going to be cracked here. Kyle Peters has some advantage going on here with tempo. His Delver hasn't flipped, and that's been pretty unfortunate for him.
Yeah, Joe is being very patient right now, and part of the reason he has the luxury to do so is because this Delver has not flipped.
He's had a sword since turn 1 that he just hasn't played. Kyle's going to go ahead and knock Joe down to 15 with Deathrite Shaman's ability.
Is Joe going to take advantage of this shields down moment?
He can play around Dave's here, so he knows removal will work. Opts not to. Sylvan Library was the draw for Kyle Peters.
Not a flip, but still not shabby.
And just another swing of 1. Joe's down to 14. Kyle's clock very slow here, but he's going to go to work on Joe's mana, which is pretty effective. He's going at the Tundra again.
Part of the reason that Joe plays so many basics is because he can't afford to be wastelanded that many times.
Yeah. His colors will still be fine to a point. He has drawn his one of Mystic Gate, which is in his hand right now. Effective at making double mana of any color. Not very great if you're playing lots of 1 mana spells. It can get messed up there. He's going to Swords the Deathrite. And this is a situation where Kyle didn't swing the Deathrite, and there was no instants or sorceries in the graveyard, so he actually just got to Swords the Deathrite.
Yeah.
Sylvan Library. Kyle, the difference between Deathrite and Sylvan Library there, he opted to go for Library. And I like that. I mean, that will let him flip this Delver. And end step Brainstorm for Joe finds a fetch land, 2 fetch lands, and a Venser.
Well, it's potentially over the course of 2 turns. Sylvan Library doesn't immediately have any sort of flip because it's a draw step card, but
yeah, that's what I mean. It'll let him finally work his way toward it.
Yeah. But Joe's hand now stocked with mana and still has some time. I mean, he is battling back from a pretty big early deficit.
Delver checks. Can that guy finally flip? No, it is 0 for 4. But a good top 3 here for Kyle Peters. It is Goyf, V-Click, and Land. I would not be surprised to see Peters draw them all.
Yeah, just take them all.
Yep, and he's going to do that. Go to 12.
Joe's not threatening your life total. Just grab all the cards. I think that maybe there's a different argument. If one of the cards is a spell, maybe you only pay 4, leave the spell on top to guarantee your Delver flip, but it was just a land and 2 creatures, so.
Yeah, Blade's the 3rd mana, so now he has Vendilion Click, Tarmogoyf, and Deathrite Shaman at the ready, so a lot more weapons. The Tarmogoyf's actually still pretty small right now. The lands, I think, the yards are pretty much just lands and a Brainstorm. Just land instant. Deathrite Shaman, replacement Deathrite Shaman hits the table for Kyle. And is he going to commit the Tarmogoyf? The answer is no.
You're trying to play a little bit slowly. I mean, right now, he has 0 protection against Terminus.
So he's playing around Terminus.
It's not bad to measure his threats. I mean, Joe's on 12. He's facing quite a bit of power in play. Kyle still has a Vendilion Click in hand to give him some play if something happens to his board.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to skimp, though. You know, Joe doesn't have that many ways to set up. He doesn't have a top. You see Pyroblast, the draw for Joe, so he now actually has the Delver of Secrets covered once again.
And he can go get a basic mountain too.
I fear Delver will never achieve his dream of insectile glory.
He will have to remain a mere laboratory assistant.
Yep, 0 for 5 on flips, gosh. All right, Sylvan Library is gonna look at all 3. Abrupt Decay, Liliana, land. Yeah, I might put the land back. He's gonna draw just Liliana, doesn't want the Abrupt Decay. I suppose there's no counterbalance in play yet. And now with Abrupt Decay on top, he can flip the Delver next turn if he wants to do so. I'm not sure he does, though.
Still, I don't think, I still think it's worth giving it a shot.
All right, he's gonna hit Joe down to 11. I suppose here he can end step, use Deathrite Shaman, and if the Delver dies, he can cast the V-Click, so he's still not out of things. But part of me wants, you know, I want to use that Liliana. Yeah, he's going to use Deathrite to exile a card from the graveyard, and now he's going to go for a Liliana.
It's one of the more problematic cards for Joe's deck once it's in play.
Yeah, and I don't think he has the counter for it. Yes, you see Jace, Misdirection, Venser.
I think he has his own copy of Vendilion Click, which is not bad for taxing planeswalkers.
No, Kyle can plus the Liliana, in which case, which means this is what he will do, so it won't kill it, but it'll be good. Yeah, it's going to plus. Looks like Kyle's going to discard a land. Joe with a bunch of extra cards too. I don't think he's too hurt by this Liliana. He seems like he has cards to burn.
Yeah.
And interesting enough, he discards the Vendilion Click.
Perhaps ready with a backup click?
Could be. Yeah, I suppose if it's the second one, it's pretty bad. Now Joe getting all 3 of his basics. We will see. He passes back the deck. Getting Pyroblast on unstep that Delver. That's fine. This does represent now some lost damage for Kyle. Kyle had opted to, he used the Deathrite to make mana so that he could not crack a fetch and get that Abrupt Decay. So now that he used the Deathrite that way, he's not going to be able to drain for 2, so Joe's going to be 2 higher than he would have otherwise been.
Yeah, and this is shaping up to be one of those games that comes down to, you know, if Joe wins, it's going to be at a pretty low life total yet again.
Yeah, Jace the Mind Sculptor, the play for Lossett. It seems like Kyle, you know, he's been playing around Terminus, but, and this is, I'm not saying it's a wrong decision. The question is, like, at what point do you decide you want to play around Terminus, and when do you not want to play around Terminus, you know?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that can go wrong from this spot, you know? Joe's just been able to slog into the point where he has kind of like a generic control plan going at this point. He has the Venser, so he can also break out of Liliana if that ever gets close to threading an ultimate. Things are starting to slip away for Kyle a little bit.
Yeah, well, the problem is Joe is still at 10. He's been attacked for so many turns, but the damage never really showed up. The top of the deck here, not very enticing for Kyle. I actually was interested that he didn't crack his fetch land before any of those draws. He knew his top 2 cards were Abrupt Decay, Verdant Catacombs. I'm not really interested in either of those cards right now.
He may still want the Abrupt Decay as an insurance policy. Counterbalance is potentially still an issue. Vendilion Click is a card he may care about, so I don't mind having the Abrupt Decay as an insurance policy.
The question is does he want to plus the Liliana? He does attack Jace down to 2 with Deathrite and passes the turn, makes no inroads on Joe's life total. It doesn't use Liliana.
Yeah, that's actually the biggest problem that I have with keeping the Abrupt Decay here. If you're not going to use Liliana the Veil, then you're really letting Joe off the hook.
Yeah, well, if you have Abrupt Decay, I mean, the problem is his cards are Vendilion Click and Abrupt Decay, so plussing Liliana comes at a pretty big cost to him. I think the cost to Kyle's hand is greater than the cost to Joe's hand.
Well, Kyle could have paid for taking a land, shuffled away the extra land for a clean look, and at least been able to continue to plus the Liliana.
Yeah, discarding that land. Joe's going to pass the turn, and I think we will now see an end step.
But Joe's developing,
that's not going to work, though.
Joe's developing this pretty awesome hand. He's got Jace going. The game's slipping away from you. I feel like if Kyle's going to win this game, it has to involve stealing it with Liliana somehow. Joe just kind of can't handle it, and it generates enough value to allow Kyle to squeeze out the last few points. So I think you have to play the game in such a way that allows you to plus Liliana every turn.
Yeah, he's going to go for that end-step Vendilion Click. Joe can deal with it in a variety of ways. He could just Venser it back to Kyle's hand. Mainly just he wants to protect his Jace.
Yeah.
So I would guess he'll just do that. Yep. Venser, and he's going to do that before the Vendilion Click resolves. He's going to bounce it while it's still a spell so that Kyle doesn't get any triggers.
Now this does allow Kyle to shift gears and just minus the Liliana if he's feeling so inclined, but these are the exchanges I'm pretty sure Joe is happy with. Trying to set the game in such a place where he doesn't have to worry about Liliana going ultimate, protect Jace as long as possible, ideally set up a Terminus, and take the game over from there.
And Venser puts it back into his hand. And that Venser play allows Joe the security of having another Jace activation. It's like, you know, kind of a rule of thumb that if someone gets to activate Jace 3 times in a game of Legacy, that's pretty synonymous with winning.
Yeah, it has to be a matchup where there's asymmetrical warfare going on for the other player to win.
Yeah.
They have to be trying to do something completely unfair or
like sometimes if they have a true name and you have no answers in your deck, like, okay, you can draw cards, sure.
Assuming that our cards kind of collide with each other's cards at a certain point, an uncontested Jace for a couple turns should be a game win.
And looking at Kyle's hand, it's not that Kyle has lack of cards here. You see Force of Will, Daze, Vendilion Click, Abrupt Decay in his hand. He's going to Edict away the Venser. Wants to try to attack that Jace down, but getting rid of Jace is so hard, especially because Jace finds copies of Jace. You know, he's done all this work with Deathrite Shaman to hit the Jace down, and you just have that sinking feeling that when he finally kills it, Joe's just going to drop another one.
Yeah.
Vendilion Click main phase, going to do it while Joe's shields are down. Can see his hand. Joe doesn't like the card that he left on top of his deck, so he's going to crack a fetch before the Vendilion Click comes down, so he gets a fresh draw off the click.
Legacy Open competitors, that's time in the round. Time in the
And Tundra is the find. And we see Misdirection, Vendilion Click, Venser, and Island. Nothing huge here. I guess you'd want to take his... Oh gosh, Vendilion Click, because then, I don't know.
It's a blocker.
It's a blocker. Yeah, it blocks the flyer.
Feels like the best card in the hand.
On the other hand, you can Abrupt Decay the Vendilion Click, and you can't, so you may want to take Venser.
Yeah, I think Kyle's coming to the same conclusion.
Yeah, he has the Vendilion Click covered, so there's a problem. They drew Joe an extra card. You know, Joe's going to go, what, 5 cards deeper this turn? So that card, plus his draw step, plus his Jace Brainstorm. Plenty of time to find all the answers he could want. Yep.
So we are at time in the round. The feature match area gets a little bit longer, but that clock is accurate.
Yeah, 6 minutes remain. It's going to be very hard. The best thing that Joe's playing with a draw in hand right now.
Yeah.
Which is not a particularly relevant thing for him because no one wants a draw here. But if Joe can just not lose for 6 more minutes, then, you know, he can do the old 1-0 victory.
I'm sure not his first and not his last.
Wins a win. He brainstorms here with a fetch land. Hasn't cracked fetch land, but he did get a counterbalance. It's a relevant piece for his deck, but I don't think we're not at that point yet. He may have to shuffle it away.
He needs to clean up the board first.
Goes down to 8. He's going to crack a fetch land, I think, before using another brainstorm off Jace.
He's digging with his fetch right now, getting a clean look.
All right. Clean look. More cards. He doesn't have removal. You know, you have to think he wants a Terminus or something of the sort here. And actually, because of the land he tapped, he couldn't cast a Terminus if he finds it. He's 1 mana short. Not to mention that Kyle does have cards like Force End Days.
Yeah.
So Joe may opt to do something different. He's going to start with another Brainstorm. This is all, remember, he hasn't used the Jace yet. So he's just going to see 100 cards.
He also may want max information. It wouldn't surprise me if Joe did something, for example, like I'll Fate Seal with Jace and then try to trade or remove your Vendilion Click to make you try to slog through this mess all over again. So I think he just wants the most information before determining what exactly he wants to do with Jace.
Yeah, the cards he put back a Divining Top and a replacement Jace on top of his deck. The very next card he draws is going to be Jace. So if Kyle goes, like I said before, if Kyle goes all out to kill this Jace, Joe is just going to untap and play another Jace. But that said, he wants 1 more card. He's going to brainstorm a 1 deeper. And it looks like he found some white cards, probably a kill spell. It looks like it's Council's Judgment.
What's awesome about this too is, you know, with this Vendilion Click is you cannot protect it with Force of Will, but on this board you can definitely protect it with Misdirection against an Abrupt Decay.
Oh, wow. Oh, man, that's all right. Yep, you sure can. It's real good to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah, remember, he's bearing that top because the top is Pithing Needled. If you recall, that happened way back in the early turns of the game. And we see a fetch here from Kyle. Entertainingly, Kyle is at 6, and this has all been his own doing. So part of him does have to watch out that Joe doesn't just like end step throw a V-click out and hit him.
Yeah, or just entreat for 2. There are ways now that Joe can just randomly go on the offensive and win.
And Daze, Ponder, and Tombstalker are the cards for Kyle. I don't think Kyle can draw extra cards anymore. 2 is actually like not a life total I'm particularly comfortable going to. Especially when my opponent has a V-click. You know, that the dimension of the game becomes so different if your opponent can just end step kill you.
Correct. And it's not like any of those cards appreciably change what he can do this turn, so I think it's worth waiting. Maybe he pays 1 last time, but I don't think that's the right spot.
Two minutes remain in the round, a little over 2. I think we're going to reach the conclusion of this game naturally. I don't think they're going to go to time on it. Both players are getting pretty low. Well, I think if Joe wins, it'll be in, like, Joe won't win, you know, but if he doesn't lose, he will clean up everything sufficiently to a point I would say, where I could say, I think Joe will win.
Yeah.
So yeah, either Kyle will win or Joe will win or Joe will effectively win. I don't think we'll have a legitimate draw. And a great move here. No, the Venser's gone. Okay. So attack with Vendilion Click and Deathrite Shaman. I'm presuming they're at Jace and not at Joe. All right, the Deathrite's going at Jace. The Vendilion is going at Joe. At this point, Kyle assumes, I imagine would assume, that the Abrupt Decay will be good here.
Well, he knows from the Vendilion Click from the previous turn that there's a misdirection in hand, I believe.
Okay. So does he want to? Yeah. So maybe he's gonna go ahead and just force the Vendilion Click then, pitching Daze. It's interesting. It's not something I dislike. One of my questions is that if you're making that play, why take the Abrupt Decay anyway? Oh, he's gonna do so. Oh, right. So this could work. So yeah. Joe's gonna misdirect the force, and now Kyle can Abrupt Decay. But there, I believe, does Joe play a second misdirection?
He's got misdirection blue card as his last two.
Yeah, he plays second misdirection. Wow. Well, that's gonna be real good.
Joe never not has all the bases covered. He always has them all covered.
Misdirection blue card, huh? Well, that seems pretty good. Now, and is that Abrupt Decay? Here's something which Kyle should watch out for. Is Abrupt Decay the last card in his hand, or he has one?
He has a Tombstalker and Abrupt Decay.
Okay, if he plus to Liliana here, before doing this whole exchange, he'd be safe.
Yeah.
So Vendilion Click resolve. Oh, the Vendilion Click actually resolved targeting Kyle.
Oh my goodness.
And then here it is, Abrupt Decay.
Oh my goodness.
It's gonna go kill Kyle Sings.
The second misdirection.
Yeah, he plays two. Yup.
Joe just never not has it all covered.
Right. Yeah, everything's dead. Everything but the Jace is dead.
Yeah. Somehow the game has navigated to a point where everything's dead except Joe's Jace.
Well then, yeah, block. Yup. And Kyle does not have the correct tap to play his Tombstalker. Oh no, Tombstalker's on the bottom, sorry.
Yeah.
So he's gonna plus the Liliana 3, discard his Daze, and now we have empty board versus empty board, but Joe has Jace. Well, that's a...
How did this happen?
How did we get here?
How did it work exactly to the point where everything's gone except for Joe's Jace as he rolls up his sleeves a little bit?
I've been here. All right, mission accomplished.
He is.
Fate seals a ponder away. And now Kyle has 3 turns to go. That was turn 0. Council's Judgment to wave the Sylvan Library.
Joe.
Here comes the grind. Are you ready to draw some lands? We're going to give you some lands. Kyle voted for Pithing Needle on that one.
Yeah.
So they're both gone now.
Doesn't really matter too much.
Turn 1.
If I was Kyle, I would just be looking to get out of Dodge. I wouldn't want to play another minute of this match.
My gosh. It's freaking Jace. That guy just never dies. Oh, look, Divining Top. A good thing we got rid of that needle. Yeah. And he had it buried. You know, he knew the Divining Top was coming.
Right.
All right. Looks at some cards, puts them back. Looks at some of Kyle's cards. Doesn't put that one back. He's going to ship that one.
Yeah, now.
It's Brainstorm. No one give him that.
If this match had actually concluded, I believe Joe would have won in a couple turns here.
I don't think it's a couple of turns. I mean, I think he would. Okay.
Hooray, Ashiok! I believe this may be a legacy debut.
All right, Ashiok in play. It's going to resolve.
Pluses.
It's going to go at Joe's deck. In response, he's going to draw a card. Then he's going to exile a top, a counterbalance, a Caracas. What did he draw? He drew Venser. Okay. Oh, he didn't want to give Kyle a creature. That's definitely can't do that. Oh, Venser's going to bounce Liliana. Let's reset that thing.
Yep.
Whew. Dodged one there.
Yeah, then he has to. This is all.
This is all. Wait, this is in response to what?
To the Liliana, some activate. I don't know.
Why did you discard it?
Joe's just doing some Harlem Globetrotter stuff at this point.
I don't even know what.
Just spinning the ball on his finger.
Wait, why is the Liliana discarded? I'm not saying it
There's
matters.
a Venser in response to a Liliana activation.
I thought it was in response to the Ashiok activation.
Okay. I don't know, man. Just long past the point of worrying about the details.
He drew the Venser in response to the Ashiok activation, and then he, in response to the Liliana activation, bounced her. Yeah, now he's going to make some angels. on turn 4, just to show that, hey, I could have won. Okay?
Just so you know.
Just so you know, I would have won the next turn. Don't feel bad about it. Oh, all right. Ashak's going to mill him 3 more. All right. Scalding Tarn, Plains, something else. And this is our draw. 1-0. Joe Lossett takes down the match in what is pretty much a 2-0. I think he wins on the very next attack.
Yeah, he's winning that attack.
You're right. It was only a couple of turns.
That was a really nice way to close out the Swiss rounds there. Congratulations to Joe. Again, not the weekend I'm sure he was looking for coming in, but was able to salvage a top 32 in this tournament, extend his lead over Alex Bertoncini for